Hey, welcome back to another episode of the She's Making an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Rachel and Ngom. Let's talk about rebranding today, shall we? So we've had a lot of podcasts that we've talked about branding specifically, but nothing really about rebranding. So what should you do when you're like, I need more than just a brand refresh. It's more than just like changing your colors and fonts and stuff like that. It's actually like, I think I want to speak to maybe a different audience or create a new offer or actually like overhaul the entire thing in my messaging. What does that actually look like? So I brought Monique Bryan on today, and we are going to jump into that. Monique is host of the Juicy CEO podcast. She speaks at international stages, has been featured on TV and Entrepreneur and Elle Magazine and Bustle. And let's talk rebranding. Let's do it. Hey, Monique, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to chat. So let's just dive in. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay. Well, I call myself an executive of building personal brands because I like to build your brand from the inside out. So everything from building out your strategy to your mission to your messaging, all the way to your brand visuals. And I work with women identified CEOs, so really the face behind the business. I don't really work with big companies. I really focus on the individual. And I do that through a series of different things. I do brand audits, one-on-one coaching, group programs, and personal brand photo shoots.
Oh, fun. I love that. So how'd you get into that?
Oh, the long tail. How do we get into anything? By accident, kind of, sort of. So my background's in, I have a BA in fashion design.
Oh, fun.
I consider myself
As you just showed me these like beautiful shoes. So that makes sense. Got it.
Right? I was like obsessed. So when I was doing fashion, I fell out of love with it over time. Like I did have some great opportunities, to travel and work on the manufacturing side, the global sourcing side, and really see like how the sausage is made. And maybe that's why it took a little bit of that like shine away, but it did teach me a lot about business. And while I was doing that, I was like anybody else who has like a corporate job where they're making lots of money and they're like, I should be doing this for myself. I'm so great. Then you go into entrepreneurship, you're like, this is not the same thing at all. No. This is hard. So I launched a jewelry business. And I had that for 6 years and used all my savings and every piece of power I had, every last teardrop. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is way too hard. But what I didn't realize is while I was doing that, I was learning a lot of skills. I was building a big network. I was meeting a lot of people. And people started asking me, like, how do you know this? And how do you know this about building a business? So I launched a consultancy to help other people launch their business. And through that, while I was out here, doing all the things other entrepreneurs do, is like you're watching what other people are doing, you're building funnels and courses and all these things. And I had a friend come to me one day and be like, can I be honest with you? And I was like, okay. And she's like, can you just own the personal branding space and stop doing all of this other stuff? Because you're really confusing everyone. I was like, what? She's like, everyone else knows that's what you do except for you. I was like,
I love that.
It was like the best advice. And at the same time, I was like, what am I missing? And what I didn't realize is while I was talking about business, I was talking a lot about how you show up as a business owner and how you communicate visually with your messaging, all of those things. And it all came back to who are you really as a brand and building a brand over a business and how much more longevity that would have if you really focused on it. But I didn't know that at the time. So I started studying personal branding and what does that mean and who's doing this on a big scale and how can I put my own personal spin on it? And that's actually how it came to be. So it's so funny because I always wonder, like all those things I did around fashion and doing photo shoots and having my own jewelry line, having to market and brand, all those skills I had learned translated into what I do now.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, that's so fun. So talk to us about, your personal brand. What are some of the most important elements that we should have when it comes to developing our personal brand?
I mean, you definitely need to have a mission.
Yeah.
So I always like to start with the end in mind. Why are you building anything at all? First things first is know you are a brand, whether you've been curating it or not. People out here are talking about you when you're not around. That's really what your brand is. So my goal is to make sure that you're curating that message. So first things first is know who you're trying to influence, what message you're trying to put out here, what change you're trying to make. Own a lane. I mean, we hear this in business. It's the same thing with your brand. We can't be everything to everyone or we're confusing as heck. Yeah. Really, you want to make your name synonymous with the expertise you say that you are doing out here. So those are the very first things. And then also looking at developing your mindset. It's something people may not associate with brand because we think logos and pretty pictures and beautiful photo shoots. But it all begins with when you're about to go and step out here into the quote unquote spotlight, any level you're about to go to is going to require your mind to, you're going to need some strength of mind because people are going to have a lot of opinions about what you're doing all the time. They're going to have opinions anyways, right? Yep. So making sure that you're strengthening your mind, you're strengthening your message, and you're really focused on the end goal of what it is you're trying to achieve. So those are the very first things when you're out here starting out to build your brand.
Cool. So one of the things I definitely want to talk about with you today is rebranding, because this I think is something that can trip a lot of people up. So what is rebranding? How do we know when it's time to do a rebrand?
There are a lot of things to look at and evaluate before you decide, am I out here trying to rebrand? So first of all, rebranding can be a really juicy marketing moment, right? And by that, I mean, we're out here, putting things out all the time. And eventually we say things and, it becomes white noise and people are just like, okay, I get what they do. But when you're doing like a rebrand, if you're thinking about targeting a new audience, if you are looking to move to a new level, if you are restructuring your business, like you have a new business model, that's always a perfect time to rebrand. Also, if it's getting real stale, if you're like looking at your visuals and your communication online and you're like, this doesn't feel like me anymore. This doesn't feel authentic. I'm not excited about writing an email to anybody. I don't want to post nothing. And I don't mean don't want to post because it's exhausting, because we all know social media can be quite exhausting. Yeah. But really from that place of like, this does not feel like me. Now it's time to start thinking about rebranding.
Got it.
And I don't say I tell people don't rebrand lightly. Like, don't take that on as like, I just feel like I need a whole bunch of new colors, so I'm just going to do it. Because sometimes that can also hurt your brand. Because if you've already established a name, some consistency out here, people start to know you as that thing. So know when you rebrand, you're not starting over, but you're starting newly. So if you're going to take that on, make sure you have a real good business reason for doing it, right? Versus a feeling and emotional reason for doing it. So definitely if you have a new audience, that requires a new perspective, which would be one of the reasons to rebrand. I mean, did you want me to go through like, what are all of the steps that you could take? I mean,
I want us to get into the nitty gritty. Let's do it.
Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to look at who you're speaking to, right? Your brand is about you, sort of, but it's not for you. It's for your audience. So who are you trying to attract? It starts there. Because when you look at something like, for an example, if I have really bold, vibrant colors, bold, vibrant language that I use, it's going to attract a very specific type of clientele. There are going to be people who don't like to hear from Monique, and there's going to be people like, man, Monique, you're like my jolt of Red Bull in the morning. And that's what I've been told, and I love it. I will own it. I am like right now trying to figure out how can I put Monique as a juice in like an actual can and sell this thing, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't even know how to do that if I didn't know who I was as a brand and who I was trying to attract. So first things first is always your audience. Who are they? Who are you trying to influence? Who are you trying to attract? Then looking at what type of brand voice do you want to have out here? Meaning, how do you want people to quote unquote hear you? So not just in what you're saying when they hear you with their ears, but what do they hear when they read your communication? So you've got to know your tone of voice that you're going to be using. Is it informative? Is it in the first person? Is it in the third person? Is it conversational? You get to decide. But again, it only started with who are you talking to, right? Like if you're talking to medical professionals, that may be a very different type of language, depending on your brand, depending on how you're trying to come out here, than you talking to, you know, I don't know, moms who are like trying to figure out the best way to breastfeed, right? Like it's a different type of how they may want to be communicated too. So definitely looking at how you want to be heard. Then you want to also look at your values as a brand. What do you stand for? Because people buy from people who share their values, but they won't know what they are if you're not out here telling people what they are. We can't expect people to understand what those are. So before you ever get to visual components, we really need to know the very essence of who you are. And this is a piece I feel a lot of people skip. When we think rebrand, we're like colors, logo, photography. This is the piece. Now, if your values, your voice, and all of those things didn't change, then obviously you're going to skip over those pieces and move on to your visuals. But I like to take people through what I call like my personal brand roadmap, which has 5 levels. And the first one is mindset. Then it's building out your identity. And the identity piece is what we're talking about right now, which is your voice, your brand values, your brand personality. Listen, you must have a personality out here as a brand, as a business. Nobody wants, it's just like you don't want to date anyone without a personality. You don't want to buy from anyone who doesn't have a personality. Yep. So you've got to establish what that is. And I have some really great exercises around like giving your brand like human like characteristics. So you can figure out like, who's this person, quote unquote, I would like to hang out with. Like, I'd like to hang out with this brand. Yeah. It's kind of like when you see, you know, one of your favorite people online that you follow and you're like, man, if I just know if we met, we'd be best friends. Yep. That's how you want to think about with your brand. Like that's what those are the feelings that you want to evoke. And really thinking about the feeling piece, the emotional piece, because we buy from the emotional place. We give all kinds of rational reasons why we buy, but we really are buying from an emotional place. So you need to know what types of emotions you're trying to evoke in your audience. Then you want to look at the next level is around your marketing. So we need to clean up your digital house. But by that I mean take everything offline that no longer aligns with how you want to be perceived. If you
would that go with like going in and like deleting old Instagram pictures?
Yep, all that archive, all that bad boy, please. Wow. Okay, delete the picture, and that's a hard one for people. I find they're like, I have all of these great pictures, just archive them, screen save them, or start a different account and put your personal account on private. But take it down, take down interviews that no longer apply, articles, but also update those bios, people. So often we forget, we think people aren't reading 150 characters on an Instagram bio, and you'd be wrong, right? Like that's all they have to go on. So cleaning up your bios, cleaning up your photography. Like if your profile pictures don't look like you anymore, darling, it's time to move on. Just give it up. Just give it up. 10 years ago, we all wish we looked like we did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I feel more wrinkles now.
Right? It's like embrace them. So clean up that digital house. Then look at your marketing channels. So whether you are rebranding or you're building your brand, it comes back to the who you're trying to attract. So if last time you had a brand and you knew your people were over on Instagram, maybe that's your marketing channel. But now maybe you're targeting businesses and LinkedIn's your marketing channel. So pick a marketing channel that you know you're going to be consistent on and you're going to show up, and then start sharing. So you couldn't share if you didn't know your values, you didn't know your voice. That's why I always encourage people, please go in order. Yeah. People love to skip steps, but go in order, because if you know how you want to communicate, now you can share on these marketing channels with some confidence, right? So start sharing your values, your beliefs, your messaging, the lessons you want to share. So you can start bringing people into your world, because it takes time for people to, 1, see you, 2, trust you, right? And then decide like, oh, they really know what they're talking about. They've been here a while. I've been listening to this subject and this person comes up often. The only way they're going to know that is if you're sharing on the marketing channels. Yeah. So definitely sharing on and deciding on what your marketing is going to be, building out that content, and then focus on your brand visuals.
Hmm.
So this is looking at, if you are the face of the brand, this is looking at your personal style. However you want to show up is however you want to show up. But I always say, like, put your best polished foot forward, right? Yes, we'd all love to just roll around in Lululemons all day. And if that is your brand, then definitely do it. Do not stray from the who you are. If you are not meant to be wearing a suit, don't be putting on a suit. You are not fooling anybody. Be you, but be your best polished you, because when you feel confident, you act confident. And people want to buy from confident looking like people. Yep. So it's just science, just do it. Then building out your brand assets. So this is now getting into like your brand photography, your graphics that are consistent with your brand messaging. So knowing your personality and your voice, you'll now easily be able to either build yourself or hire a team to build out those visuals for you because they know who you are, right? There's nothing worse than trying to hire a creative person onto your team and they create these beautiful things and you're like, they just don't get me. You know, it's like, oh, I told her 1,000 times who I was and what I wanted, and this just doesn't look like me. And it just becomes a very frustrating conversation.
Yep, for sure. So can we go back to number 1 and mindset and talk about like maybe the fear that we might have in rebranding of like, we built up this whole brand. What's it really going to take to start over?
Yeah, it's really one of those things that you've decided to do and you're just going to embrace it, because the reality is we're always starting something kind of new at some point in our business in some capacity, right? Yeah. And we get through it. With the rebrand, what I would love for people to do is kind of just tell people this is what's coming. You know, it's like sometimes we want to build things in a vacuum and then we come out here and we're like, surprise! And people are like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. But take people on the journey with you. People love to come on a journey, right? They want to see the behind the scenes to know, one, you're a real person who's doing something. And two, they want to feel like in their own life, in their own business, that they may not all have it together either. And they're like, oh, look, there's a process here. So if you're going to rebrand, I would let people know this is coming. Guys, we are changing things over here at MB Worldwide. We've got some really amazing things happening. We know that you guys have been loving the content over on the podcast. Don't worry, that's still going to be happening. But we are going to be adding a whole new arm to our business. Just stay tuned. You won't be able to miss it. And if you want to know more, make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter where we'll be sending you guys updates, like really like bring people into your business. I think that will really alleviate the fear for people.
Yeah. How do you suggest using it as a marketing tool, like for advantage?
That right there. It's like telling people, like creating content around what's coming.
Got it.
People want to know, people want to anticipate things. Yeah. They're so used to seeing finished, polished, beautiful things that they're just like, oh yeah, another beautiful, polished, beautiful thing. Yeah. But if they've been on the journey with you to see the evolution, that's way more powerful. So I would create content that helps people be like, okay, this is coming. Count down 30 days, count down 60 days. And then it's like, we're counting down the days to the big reveal, guys. Make sure you tune in. Maybe you do a live about it, right? Maybe you bring on some collaborators, other people who also are either in your business. Maybe you're introducing new team members. Like really just like don't be afraid to be transparent about what's happening. And like each one of those announcements are a marketing moment in itself.
Awesome. What are some mistakes you see entrepreneurs make when they're rebranding?
One, doing it in a vacuum so no one knows what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Two, not thinking about the customer first, right? And just doing it kind of like for their own personal, I just want to do this versus what are the business reasons for doing it. And putting the visual components ahead of the value that you provide. When you go on a website, when you go on their social, whatever it is, we should always be able to know what you do and who you do it for. Yeah. And a lot of the times we get so wrapped up in the pretty pictures that people are like, this is gorgeous. I have no idea where I use you in my life.
Yeah.
You spent all this time and money and no one has you top of mind when they're trying to solve the problem you know you can solve.
Awesome. Okay. I want to talk about creating a standout brand? So you talked about like putting your personality out there. What would that look like practically? How can we create a brand that stands out and not just blends in?
The number one way, well, there's a few things you can do. So when I think about like your personality, it doesn't mean you need to be loud. It doesn't mean you need to have bold, giant. Like if you go to my brand, they're bold colors, they're loud. But Monique is also loud and bold. Like this is literally who I am in real life. So what's great about it is when you build something authentic to how you are, it makes it easier for you to show up, right? So it's being authentic to who you are. And I know authenticity is one of those words that are like, what does it mean to be authentic? But it really means like you're not showing up wearing a mask. You're not fake. You're not pretending to be anything other than who you are and how you want to show up. So if your demeanor is like more subdued, then show up that way. Right. But what I will say is if you were showing up on video that way, you're going to kick it up a notch. So Monique's version of a 12, 10 out of 10 is probably your, 10 out of 20. So sure. I always say like, show up at your 12, whatever your 12 is. So that means you may need to use your hands a bit more. Your voice may need to, have some inflection in that sometimes. Yep. I do a lot of auditing for my clients. Like I make them go live on video and I'm like, okay, we've watched it. Now I'm going to tell you what all the things that you did wrong, all the things you want to pump up, all the things you want to do right. So having some of that media training, if you're going to be out here, if it's really not your strength, I would advise you to get help, definitely, because video's not going anywhere. Sure. So being able to show up powerfully on video it's a great way to be a standout brand because not everyone can do it. And then the other piece is always providing value first. So one of the things when people come online, they're like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I do this. I would start with the value first and why you're here. Why am I listening to you? Yep. Then tell people who you are. Because if you give them value, they'll always look you up anyways, right? And that's something I had to learn the hard way too, right? I always used to start with, okay, I'm here, I'm this. And they'll be like, I don't know if they're finding you for the first time, like, I don't care. Why am I here? Help me with my life. Yep. So definitely, if you're always coming out here with value, you will always stand out from the rest. And then the other piece too is consistency, right? So consistency will win the day, even for people who are like so amazing on video. Yeah. You may see those people once a month, but that's not enough. People need to see you. I think it's a minimum of like, it was 7 times rule in advertising. They need to see you 7 times before they even consider buying
now it's
something.
Like 500.
Yeah, it's like 15 before they ever consider buying from you. Yep. So that means whether you think people are showing up to see you or not, whether your stats are saying it or not, I am telling you, you want to be consistent because I can't tell you how many times people have found me years later and they're like, I just went back and binge watched all your videos. That means I have just fast tracked that sales runway with them like in half. Yeah. Right? So having some consistent content out here. And then when you have the consistent like content of yourself, there's also the consistency of your brand. So those visual pieces, looking cohesive online builds trust. So if you had to make a decision in this very crowded, noisy space called the internet between one business and another, most likely you're going to pick the one that looks like it has their shit together. Right? So if you want to stand out, look like a professional online. Look like you know what you're doing, and then be giving value so you actually can back up the fact that, no, I do know what I'm doing. Yeah. Look.
Yep. Oh my gosh, that's so good. I love the consistency. I think that's super, super, super important. I think that's where a lot of people struggle with. I remember hearing Brendan Burchard say he's emailed his list and posted a new video every single week since like 2007 or something.
Oh my God, that would make sense. He's so successful.
Exactly. So I'm like, you don't necessarily have to be the best in the world. You just got to show up consistently.
You show up more than they do. Yep. That's the key.
For sure. Amazing. What does it mean to you to make an impact?
Ooh, I'm sure I answered this in a question.
Oh, let me see your nails, by the way. Those are so fun.
I
love them. They're so fun. I love it.
Thank you. They bring me a lot of joy. For me, an impact is when my clients come back to me and tell me how their life has changed for the better. That's the biggest one for me, because the people I usually work with, they're building what they're building for more than themselves. They're building it because maybe they're the first one in their family to ever be an entrepreneur. They're building it to show their kids what's possible. They're building to become the breadwinner in their household. Like, for me to be able to play a part in that for me is everything, because you never forget that. You never forget the coach or the business person who helped you realize a dream. Because I know I don't forget those coaches in my life. Yep. So for me, it's about making sure that everything I do is done with excellence, the way I would do it. Like, I always treat people's businesses like it was my own, because I have it that as a brand specialist, my name is on your brand. If you ever go anywhere and say, who helped you with that? And my name comes out of your mouth, I better have done my job. So when they do well, that's everything for me. I love giving out free content. I love, I go live every single week on Mondays at 11 on Instagram for the last 4 years. People show up or don't show up, I'm there. Even when I don't want to be, I'm there. But if I do that and people say it's of value, but they don't take action, there's no impact that's been made. So people who take action, that is impact. That is everything to me.
Yeah, I love that. What's one of the best books you've read?
Oh my God, there's like 1,000. The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
That one has been mentioned so many times on this
podcast.
Has it? So if you've been listening and you haven't read it yet, you should probably read it.
Like, get on that already, guys. Like, living in your zone of genius is like an epitome. You're like, thank God, thank you for just like giving me permission to not have to do all the other crap.
Yep.
Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Yes. I send that to all my new students. Like,
I do too. I give it to, I'm like, this is the book. Like, I read it a million times and I'm like, it's very simple, guys. It's right here. It's in black and white. What more do you need? I know you asked for one, but
no, that's great. I'll take two.
Quite a few.
So good. Where can we connect with you?
I am always over on Instagram at Monique Bryan with a Y, BRYAN_co. You can also find me on my podcast. It comes out every Wednesday, The Juicy CEO. And you can go to my website and subscribe to my email if you want at moniquebryan.com.
Awesome. Monique, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.